There's a rider on the grid right now who's won a world championship and whose bike is absolutely useless. In his words, there's zero grip, zero power, zero turning. But that same rider can drag a bike that should be right at the back of the pack, 15th and below, into the top 10, and he can do that consistently. And so the question I have is, how good do you have to be to do that? And if you're that good and see progress, why would you walk away? I'm Tim from Along Trackside. We're going to look at three things today. Firstly, how far Yamaha has fallen in MotoGP and what Quartararo is able to accomplish despite its flaws. We're going to look at the recent F1 round in Silverstone and what that tells us about the comparison between F1 and MotoGP. And we're going to explore the big question: is it the rider or the bike that makes the difference? Is it the driver or the car that makes the difference? And how that affects a current champion's mindset. Fabio Quartararo is the 2021 MotoGP champion. He's been riding for Yamaha pretty much his whole career. That's where he won his championship, and ever since, they've gone off a massive cliff. From being the future of the motorsport, they're now the laggards, always populating the back of the grid. But it's not like they have stopped trying new things. In MotoGP, each manufacturer, depending on their performance, is allowed to enhance their bike even more during the season. And what Yamaha has done is change the layout of their entire bike engine. They won with an inline 4 and they've changed that to a V4 engine, which mirrors what the fastest bikes on the current grid, but it hasn't made the difference yet. According to Quartararo, as of Assen, he had zero grip, zero turning, zero power. So how does he pull that bike up from the back of the pack and then getting top 10 results? What that tells us is that the rider makes the difference. Someone who is truly great on a machine that isn't can pull the performance up the grid. So why isn't he staying to see the project come back around and pull Yamaha back to the front of the MotoGP grid? Because he's already left, he's going to Honda next year. And there's a parallel in F1. If you look at Silverstone this weekend for the F1 race, you'll see that the machinery made the difference in the race. Antonelli has been pretty dominant this season, and it seemed like it was going to continue this week at Silverstone. He won the sprint race. He then took pole for the main Grand Prix, and it looked like he was going to dominate again in the main race. But then the car lets him down. There's a mechanical failure, and he ends up coming 16th, getting no points. The winner ends up being Charles Leclerc, Ferrari, who wins after a safety car is deployed. Russell and Hamilton follow for second and third. So it was the car that stopped Antonelli from winning the main Grand Prix. It wasn't his skill, and it doesn't matter how good a driver he is. If the car underneath him can't perform, he's not going to win. And whilst mechanical issues happen in all forms of motorsport, what we notice is really true in F1 is that if you don't have the fastest car, if you're not currently in a Mercedes or even a Ferrari, you're not going to win a race in 2026. And in fact, if you're not in one of the top cars, you're always going to be in the back half of the grid, fighting for 1 or 2 points per race weekend. And if that's the case, where machines can be so dominant, how can Quartararo make such a difference on a motorcycle in MotoGP? The reality is that on a motorbike, the human has more interaction and involvement in the performance of the vehicle. You're hanging off the bike. You're putting your knee down, your elbow down, a shoulder down sometimes. You're the one who has to throw that 200 kilo bike around the track, pushing it left and right, catching it as it slips in a corner. It's almost like the rider is part of the machine itself. And the better the rider is, the better the overall machinery works. And because the human is a bigger part of that whole machinery, it has a bigger impact. They have a bigger impact on the bike than a driver can have in a car. But the reality is there's a ceiling, and it feels like Yamaha's bike reached that ceiling with Quartararo, and he wants to change. And what's so interesting about this change is that with Quartararo leaving and going to Honda, who fills that spot? And it's Jorge Martin who's going to be filling that spot. He's coming from Aprilia, the 2024 world champion. He won that with Pramac on a Ducati. He switched to Aprilia and is currently leading the world championship standings at the moment. He's choosing to make a move from Aprilia to Yamaha. They both can't be right about who's going to have the better bike in the future. We'll be watching to see who's made the right choice. So we're back to where we started. The rider makes the difference on a bike, And we still want to watch Quartararo riding his Yamaha that isn't very good, because we're watching what he does on that bike. We want to see the skills that each MotoGP rider has on their respective bike to see what difference they can make with the machinery they're given. We've got the Saxon Ring coming up later this month, so we're going to get to see more of that action coming on. And I'd love to hear from you whether you think an F1 driver could actually make as big a difference and impact as Quartararo does on his Yamaha. Let me know in the comments and subscribe, because that helps every time.